If you ever drive past a Canadian truck stop on a January night, you'll see something that doesn't quite make sense. Rows and rows of trucks. Some engines running, some completely silent. No loading, no unloading, nobody walking around. Just big rigs sitting in the dark while the temperature outside reads minus 50 degrees Celsius. And here's the part that surprises people the most. Inside almost every one of those trucks, a driver is asleep. Not shivering, not wrapped in 5 jackets, not watching the clock and praying for sunrise. Just sleeping under a normal blanket. In what feels, from the inside, like an ordinary warm bedroom. Now, if you've never experienced real extreme cold, that probably sounds impossible. So before we talk about how Canadian truck drivers actually sleep through these nights, let me try to explain what minus 50 actually feels like. Because honestly, most people on this planet have never been anywhere close to it. At minus 50, cold stops being a temperature and becomes a force. Exposed skin doesn't just feel cold, it starts to freeze. Frostbite on fingers, cheeks, and ears can begin in just a few minutes. Touching a metal door handle with a bare hand feels like grabbing a hot pan, except in reverse, the metal pulls the heat out of your skin instantly. Even breathing changes. Take a deep breath through your mouth and the air is so cold it stings all the way down. Most drivers learn to breathe slowly, through the nose, almost without thinking about it. And it's not only the human body that struggles. This is where winter trucking becomes a genuine engineering battle. Diesel fuel starts to thicken. Engine oil turns sluggish and stops flowing the way it should. Rubber door seals shrink and stiffen. Truck batteries lose a huge part of their power. Plastic clips and connectors become so brittle they can snap like dry twigs. At minus 50, everything that was designed for normal weather slowly starts working against itself. That's the world outside the truck, genuinely hostile to people and to machines, which makes what happens inside a Canadian sleeper cab even more impressive. Because the most important piece of equipment in that sleeper cab is not what most people would guess. It's not the big diesel engine. It's not the insulation, or the curtains, or the Arctic-rated sleeping bag stored under the bunk. It's a small metal device, about the size of a shoebox, that most people outside of trucking have never even heard of. It's called a diesel bunk heater. Here's how it works, and why long-haul drivers across Canada trust their lives to it every single winter night. A normal truck heater only works when the engine is running. It borrows heat from the engine itself. A bunk heater is different. It's completely independent. It draws a tiny amount of diesel straight from the truck's fuel tank, burns it in a small sealed chamber, and blows clean warm air into the sleeper through its own dedicated vents. And when I say a tiny amount of diesel, I mean it. A typical bunk heater burns roughly half a liter of fuel per hour. Run it for a full 10-hour night and you've used about 5 liters. For a truck carrying several hundred liters of diesel, that's barely a flicker on the fuel gauge. Compare that to idling the main engine all night, which can burn 3 or 4 liters every single hour, and you understand why this little box changed winter trucking forever. Most drivers just set the thermostat to a normal room temperature and forget about it. Think about that for a second. Outside the window, minus 50. Inside the sleeper, plus 20. That's a 70-degree difference, created and held all night long by a machine small enough to fit in a backpack. But here's the thing, the bunk heater is only half of the story. Because producing heat is easy, keeping it is the hard part. And that's where the truck itself quietly becomes the hero. From the outside, a sleeper cab looks like a plain metal box bolted behind the driver's seat. But those walls are built in layers: an outer metal shell, a thick insulating core, and an interior lining, the same basic idea as the walls of a well-built house, squeezed into a box that has to survive the harshest winters in North America. The floor is insulated, the roof is insulated, the sleeper windows are designed to fight heat loss. Truck manufacturers know exactly who buys these trucks. A sleeper cab that can't hold its warmth at minus 50 simply will not sell in northern Canada. The market itself forces the engineering. And then there's one more detail that surprises almost everyone the first time they hear it. A curtain. I know, it sounds almost too simple, but every experienced Canadian truck driver uses it every single night. A thick insulated curtain snaps closed behind the front seats, and just like that, the heater is no longer trying to warm the whole cab, the windshield, the dashboard, the doors. It's only warming the small sleeping area behind the curtain. A smaller space heats up faster, holds its temperature longer, and burns even less fuel through the night. It's the cheapest piece of survival equipment on the entire truck, and drivers will tell you it might be the most effective one. So put it all together: the layered insulated walls, the sealed windows, the closed curtain, and the bunk heater humming away, and what you end up with is something close to a sealed capsule. Outside, one of the most dangerous climates on Earth. Inside, warm, stable, controlled, and inside that capsule, something happens that most people don't expect. The outside world just fades. The frozen truck stop, the ice fog, the -50 air, all of it becomes something happening on the other side of a wall. Inside the sleeper, the world becomes very small. And for a lot of drivers, that's not a downside. That's the best part of the day. Because a modern sleeper cab isn't just a bed. It's a tiny, complete home. On a cold night, most drivers spend an hour or two in there before sleeping, heating up a real meal on a small portable stove, watching a show on a screen mounted to the wall, calling home, reading perfectly ordinary evening routines happening inside a truck while the air outside is cold enough to crack plastic. And when the lights finally go out, here's the part that genuinely surprises people. Most drivers sleep really, really well out there. The bunk heater runs quietly in the background with a soft, steady hum. Drivers who idle their engines describe the low diesel rumble the same way, like a white noise machine, constant enough to smooth over every other sound. There are no stairs creaking, no neighbors, no doors slamming, nothing competing for your attention. The space is private, familiar, and completely their own. Ask drivers who spend 200 nights a year in a sleeper cab, and many will tell you something that sounds strange at first. They sleep better in the truck than they do in their own bed at home. Now, for most winter nights, everything works exactly the way it should. The heater runs, the sleeper stays warm, the morning comes, and the wheels roll again. But experienced Canadian drivers never bet their lives on everything going as planned. Because at -50, a small problem doesn't stay small for long. A bunk heater can fail. A fuel line can act up. An electrical fault can silence a system that was working perfectly an hour ago. It's rare, but rare means something different when the nearest town is 100 kilometers away and the temperature can kill. So preparation is simply part of the job. Extra blankets, always. A sleeping bag rated for extreme cold. Stored where a half-asleep hand can find it in the dark, not because the driver expects to need it, but because 2 in the morning at -50 is not the time to wish you had packed one. Real cold weather boots, gloves, and a serious jacket stay within arm's reach of the bunk. And drivers watch for early warnings. If the sleeper starts cooling even slightly, they investigate immediately. A 2-degree drop is a small job. Waiting to see if it fixes itself is a gamble that experienced drivers just don't take. None of this feels dramatic to them. It's quiet, boring, routine discipline because the weather outside is not something you can negotiate with. And then there's one last thing about these nights that almost nobody talks about. The silence. Most people imagine extreme cold as loud howling wind, blowing snow, a storm hammering the walls. But the very coldest nights are usually the opposite. When it drops to -50, the world goes still. People stay indoors. The highway empties. Even the animals stop moving. And fresh snow lies over everything like a thick blanket, soaking up every sound before it can travel. Drivers who step out of the cab at 2 in the morning describe the same thing, again and again. A stillness so complete it almost has a presence. Some call it peaceful. Some call it eerie. Almost all of them say it's unlike anything else they've experienced anywhere in the world. A frozen, silent landscape stretching for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. And right in the middle of it, one warm little room on wheels, a bunk heater quietly sipping diesel, and a truck driver fast asleep. So now you know what's really happening inside those trucks. The next time you pass a Canadian truck stop on a winter night and see those rigs sitting in the dark, you won't wonder anymore. You'll know. Now I want to hear from you. If you're a trucker, what's the coldest night you've ever slept through in your cab? And did you run the engine or trust the bunk heater? And if you're not a trucker, what's the coldest weather you've ever experienced in your life? Drop it in the comments below because I genuinely read every single one. If you enjoyed this look at winter trucking, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about life on the road, because next time, we're heading somewhere even stranger. The frozen highways that only exist for 8 weeks a year, built entirely on ice thick enough to carry 40 tons, most of the time. Stay warm out there, and I'll catch you on the next stretch of road.